Greetings, and in this short video presentation we're going to see how we go about installing Samba onto a Linux server using Webmin. To begin this lab, we're going to ensure that we have the Samba package installed onto our Fedora server. So I've gone ahead and copied and pasted in the command from my lab file that says dnf space install Samba space Samba-client. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and it should come back and just tell me that the package is already installed. DNF has confirmed that the Samba package is already present, so there's nothing for us to do. Now we can go ahead and run another command to check to see what actual packages were installed. This command is also available from within the lab, so we can now see and confirm what packages Samba has installed. All these commands that you see being used in the terminal are available inside of the lab. If you open up the lab, you can copy and you can paste those commands directly into the terminal if you have either the guest editions or the VMware tools installed. Having the guest editions or the VMware tools installed allows you access to your clipboard. So I've gone ahead and copied in the command to make the exception for the firewall. I'm going to hit enter, and it should come back and tell me that, hey, it's already been done. Anytime we reconfigure our firewall, we need to do a reload, and that should come back and tell me that it was successful, and it does. The next thing we have to do is build that test user Smb account. To do this, we're going to add a user to our server using the user add command. Now I've called this user test user, but you're free to call your test user anything you want. Once I hit this, it'll go ahead and create the account and come back up and tell me the account was created successfully. I'm not going to do that because I've already created the account. That test user account gets created up inside of the password file. I can use the cat command to display all the user accounts that are inside of the password file, and I'm doing that right now. So I've typed in cat space /etc where the password file is located. I'm now going to hit enter, and down here at the bottom you can see my test user account is present. For me to create a Smb account for test user, I must first create a user account on the local machine for test user, and that is the procedure we just completed. So in this next step, we're actually going to create the Smb account for test user and create a password. So when I hit this, it's going to come back and tell me that I need to type in the password for my Smb user called test user, and I will confirm that password, and that user will now have Smb access. So once we're done creating that Smb user account for test user, we can move on to accessing the Webmin management console. To do this, I've opened up Firefox, and up inside of the address bar I've typed in https://localhost:10,000. That is the port and the address for your Webmin console. Now remember, the user account that we're going to use to access Webmin is always root with the root password. I'm going to go ahead and sign in. Once the Webmin management console has settled down, we can go over to the left window pane, click on servers, and underneath servers we can go to Samba Windows file sharing. Once the Samba server loads up inside of the Webmin, it brings us to the Samba Windows file sharing page. Here we can create shares by going down here where it says create a new file share. Let's go ahead and do that. Takes me over to the next page. For this file share, I'm going to type in admin tools. We must now tell Samba which directory we want to install this Samba share. So we're going to click on this icon right here. That brings up all of the directories that are available onto my local machine. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom, and over here I'm going to select home. Now I'm going to say select. By clicking on that button, brings us back to the create file share page, and everything else is going to remain as a default. I'm going to say create, and that's going to bring me back to the file sharing page. Back here at the Samba Windows file sharing page, we have a list of all of the available shares up on the Samba server, and here is the admin tools folder that we just created. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Now underneath here we have what's called the other share options. We have the security and access control and file permissions. We're going to begin by clicking on the security and access controls for this particular share. A couple of things we have to do in here. First, we've got to ensure that the share is writable. Then we've got to select our valid users. I'm going to click on this folder icon over here. That's going to take me over to my users that are currently installed onto this server. I'm going to scroll on down till I come to test user, and I select test user and say select, and now I have test user in here as well. Everything else can remain as a default. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom and I'm going to click on the save button. The next item we need to configure for this file share is file permissions. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. What you want to watch out for is to ensure that the Force Unix file mode and the Force Unix directory mode are both set to 755. Go ahead and type in those numbers, and once you've done that, you can go ahead and leave everything else as a default and click save. Once you're back at the Samba Windows file sharing page, you can scroll down here to the bottom until you come to Samba Users. The next thing we have to do is create all of our Samba user accounts, and we do that by looking at all the user accounts we have currently on this machine, and we convert them over to being SMB users. The easiest way to do this is to click on the Convert Users button. This takes you over to the conversion page, and here you can leave everything as a default and just click on Convert Users, and then once that has confirmed, you can return back to the share list. Once your Samba users have all been converted over, you're now ready to restart or start your Samba servers. Scroll down to the bottom of the page and you will find either the Start or the Restart Samba Servers button. I'm going to go ahead and click on that. This will now restart my Samba servers. Once the Samba servers have restarted or started, you can close out the Webmin Management Console. Back at the desktop, you can go to Activities, go up to the search bar, and bring up your terminal. By default, the Samba server will not automatically start at logon or boot. To make this happen, we have to type in the following command. Type in chkconfig space cmb space on. This will start the Samba server at boot or startup. As with every Linux service, there is a major configuration file known as the .conf file or config. Samba is no different. We have an smb.conf file that we can test for syntax errors by using the command test_parm. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter. That brings up the results of the test, and now I can hit enter again and I can bring up all of the configurations that are currently inside of the smb.config file. This is all the changes we made up inside of the Webmin. It's all here. Anything we've done and all the defaults would be located inside of this config file. If you want to edit this file, access it through the path that is given to you up here with your favorite editor, such as Nano. So I would type in nano space /etc/samba/smb.conf. That concludes the Samba server portion of this lab. We're now ready to move on with testing our access to the Samba shares from both a Fedora workstation client and a Windows 7 client. So I'm going to go ahead and move on over to my Fedora workstation. By default, Linux does not work with SMB. We have to install either the Samba server onto the server or the Samba client utilities onto the workstation. So we're at the workstation, so I'm going to install the Samba client utilities here. Once I've done that, I will be able to listen for Samba servers and Windows servers and shares on a Windows network. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter, and it's going to come back and tell me that the package is already present. For Samba to work, we have to have the same matching user account and password on all of our workstations. So I created a test user up on the Samba server with a specific password. I've got to create that same user account or use the same user account onto my workstation here for Linux with the same password. Again, I'm going to use the user add command to add an account for test user. Then I'll use the password passwd command to create the password for my test user account on this Linux workstation. Here I've typed in the command user add space test user. When I hit enter, it will go ahead and create a local user account for someone called test user. I'm now going to go ahead and use the password command to create the password for test user. If you need to add a password for a user account or change a password for any user account, you can use the passwd command. Now, what happens when I hit enter is it will just come back to the prompt. If there's any problems, then I will get an error message. With our SMB utilities in place, our user account created, our password is set, we're now ready to access the SMB shares on my SMB server. To do this, I'm going to type in SMB client space -L space / the IP address of my SMB server / space -U space test user. Now when I hit enter, it should come up and ask me for the test user password, and it does. So that password that we created earlier for the test user account is what I'm going to type in next. Once I type in the correct password, I am then presented with the shares that test user has access to. This is confirmation that our SMB server is up and it is running, and I have access to those shares on my Samba server. We're now going to access the shares using the GUI. To do this, I'm going to go and click on Activities, go down here to the File box. From here, I'm going to go over to Other Locations. From here, I'm going to go down to where it says Address, and I'm going to type in SMB : / the IP address of my SMB server. I can now say Connect, and that brings up the shares as well. Now normally I'd be able to go over here to Other Locations and I would see there would be a server 1 or whatever the name of the server here is, letting me know that it found a server on the network that was running SMB. It's also seeing all of my Windows clients because my Windows clients are configured for SMB. So if I have shares and I do have a user account for test user present onto my workstation for Windows 7, I can click on this, and then it brings up the Samba, and from here I should be able to access the Samba shares using the GUI. Opening Samba, yes. Alright, so that is another way that you can access it other than having to go down and use the command line. There's server 1, and if I click on that, there are my admin tools and other shares that are available on my Samba server. Click on this again and go back over here to Networks, and you'll see that I have a work group. This is how Windows machines are identified by default. So there's an expat box over. If I click on that, it's not going to give me access without going in and typing in a username and password. Since this machine is not a member of the domain, that may not work. Usually my machines are part of a Server 2012 domain, so that's not going to probably happen. Since these machines are really not part of the same authentication or the same network, they're not going to be able to see each other. If my Windows 7 box was in a work group and not in a domain, then they'd be able to see each other much easier. Now what we're going to do is go over to the Windows 7 machine, and in here, I'll go ahead and close this out and do this over again. I've already accessed this to confirm that it worked, but I'll show you how I did it. What I did here was I just went to the search bar and I typed in / the IP address of my Samba server, and that brings up the shares. I've already been accessing this, so it already sees my user account for test users, so I can click on this and get access to it. Now what I did here next was I created a map drive just by going into the folder, right-clicking and selecting Make a Map Drive. So if I want a persistent connection over to the Samba server from my Windows client, I just use the same procedure that I do if I'm trying to connect to a Windows server. I can now go into the computer, and there is the test user that we just created. If I wanted, I could just say disconnect, and I could start the whole process over again. So that's all I got for you for this particular lab. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact your instructor, and I will see you in my next video.